Hello everybody and welcome back to the United Stand. I'm really excited about today's show because we have got an exclusive interview with the one and only Simon Stone. So thank you, Simon, for being here.
Very good to be here.
Everyone's very excited to have you. We are going to be getting into takeover news, transfer news, everything, all of the above. We're really excited to have you. The first time on the United Stand, I think, so it's great to have you here. But let's get straight into things. Obviously, Simon, you've been very clued up on the takeover so far of Manchester United. I think a lot of people are questioning why it's gone so quiet. So could you give us your insight on where we're actually at with this whole takeover saga right now?
Well, I think we're just waiting. We're waiting for the Glazer family to decide what their next steps are, whether that is to sell a majority of the club to Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos, whether to sell the whole of the club to Sheikh Jassim, or whether to sell a minority of the club to one of the potential investors who put themselves forward as a funder. And I think that is basically where we're at. It seems as though it's taken a long time. I'm doing a podcast with the BBC, How to Buy a Football Club, and we did number 31 today.
I remember when that first started as well. It doesn't feel like
nobody
we thought it was nearly there, didn't we?
Nobody expected it to be going on this long, and they said, why didn't you name it How to Not Buy a Football Club or Not Be Able to Sell a Football Club? And it's kind of become a bit of amusing like that. But the people who are in charge of the process, the Rain Group and clearly the Glazer family, they talk about the complexities involved in doing any kind of deal. Don't forget, obviously, the club is part floated on the New York Stock Exchange, so whether that is some part of it as well, it's clearly not just as simple as someone coming up and saying, here's a load of money, I want this, and then you just hand it over. It's more complex than that. That's why it's taking time. But it is a frustration, and I'm sure it's a frustration for everybody at the football club. I'm sure it's a frustration for Erik ten Hag, and whilst it's not having a major impact on the transfer window in terms of the business Manchester United are doing, there is a bit of an impact financially in terms of if you sold the club, you may be able to get rid of the interest payments, for instance, which go against financial fair play, and it's the financial fair play that is stopping the club doing big business this summer.
Well, I wanted to get into that as well, and we were speaking a little bit before the show. The financial fair play is something that keeps coming up in the media regarding Manchester United, and it keeps... for some United fans, they feel like it's being used a little bit as an excuse as to why Man United can't go out and buy these players that we would have wanted to buy. So with the financial fair play, could you just kind of give us clarity on what Man United's situation is with that? Because, we've seen Chelsea sell players. They had a little bit of an issue with that. They've sold loads of players. Surely if United just sold some assets, they'd be able to kind of negate against that.
Well, yes, but you have to be able to sell them. And basically financial fair play is built over 3 years, and you can lose up to £105 million. Now, the fact is that Manchester United spent a lot of money last year, and they can't afford to sustain huge losses again. So you have to balance the budget almost, and that's why you can't just go out and spend 100 million on this player, 100 million on the next player, 100 million again. You've got to be very careful in the money that you're spending. But you're right, you need to bring in money as well. And what we saw with Chelsea was that some deals needed to be done by the 30th of June. And that is the cut-off point in financial terms for each year. Then a new financial year starts again on the 1st of July. Clearly, we're past that now. So any deals that are done for Manchester United to sell players, they have to be done in this current financial year. So that's the problem. You don't want to be in a situation where you've spent loads and loads of money and then suddenly you've got to recoup it in the same way that Chelsea were, because everybody knows that you're selling players, and unless the clubs in Saudi Arabia, in which they did fortuitously for Chelsea, unless they start coming for your players in May and June of next year, you can land yourself with a problem.
Do you have any idea of what the budget is for United?
Well, I think I've been told that there's money there to buy a goalkeeper, that there is money there to buy a number 9 as a striker. But then it's not
Depends
the
on which
money.
one, though, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is what I was about to say. That it's not the money that would be, allowing you to go out and spend £90 million on a goalkeeper and then another 90, £100 million on a striker. I think we're probably looking at half those sums, if that. And I think that when you add in Mason Mount, there is your budget. And then beyond that, you need to generate money through sales. Now, you can do that. We all know which kind of players Manchester United might sell. But doing deals is a lot easier said than done. If you look at most of the Manchester United players, they're on good wages, even for the Premier League. And we're not even talking about the best paid players. They're on good money in the Premier League. If they go somewhere else, well, they don't want to lose money. Players don't want to lose money, so you have to find a way of compensating them. And also, this is a bit technical, but there's the value of the player against their book value, so the amortization. So if you buy a player, say for instance, for £100 million and give him a 5-year contract, well, for the club, his value goes down by £20 million every year. So if you try and sell someone who's 3 years into a 5-year contract, then you bought them for £100 million, well, he's worth £40 million. If you trying to sell him for 20, well, you're losing money against the kind of paper value of that player as well. So that all comes into account as well. It is a little bit boring, really. It's technical, it's complicated, but it's real, and you can't just dismiss it.
Exactly, it's very interesting, and obviously you spoke before a little bit about how maybe if the sale would have happened before this, we would have had a little bit more leg room. We'll get onto that, but we have had a super chat in from LJ who says, it seems the Glazers have been debating a decision for many months now, and my therapist has said I have commitment issues. Have a great show, Beth and Simon. I like that little joke.
That's a good one, I like it.
But yeah, speaking on that, I just want to quickly just go back for that for a second. You speak about the takeover. We have heard lots of different news at different times. We've heard certain journalists come out, it's really close now. I had Ben Jacobs on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he said it seemed like Sir Jim Ratcliffe was out of the race because his bid was getting a little bit of pushback from the minority shareholders. But then Sir Jim did an interview that was saying he was still in the race. It's all super complicated. But to your knowledge, has there ever been a point where it's been close? Is Sir Jim still in the race?
I think he is. I think nothing is off the table. As my understanding, nothing is off the table. And I go back to what I said before, that we all get told things, and there can be frustration from one side or another. There can be a belief that this is going to happen, or that's going to happen, or this is happening now, and it's really significant. I was told a rumour the other day that Sheikh Jassim was about to pull out, and then I checked that, and that was just dismissed. And there's all kinds of rumours, but ultimately people can feel the way that they feel. They can be frustrated. They can believe that they're in pole position. They can believe that they're behind. But it comes back to the Glazers. The only thing I would say, and there was a lot of reporting about this, was when we were at the period of final deadlines, which seems like months ago now. Yeah. After that, there were more bids came in from Sheikh Jassim, and that was off the back of Jim Ratcliffe, who I was told, my colleague had spoken to people, Faisal Islam, and he was told Jim Ratcliffe is the ultimate deal maker. And it depends how you view Sheikh Jassim, but if you think that Sheikh Jassim has got more financial muscle to flex than Jim Ratcliffe, well, Jim Ratcliffe has then got to do a deal. Well, he came up with a deal, didn't he, by reducing the amount that he wanted to buy of the football club and offering the Glazer family a chance to remain, but taking over more than 50%, so he would be in control. That was viewed as a move that had got Jim Ratcliffe ahead. This was never challenged by anyone, but you can only assume on the basis that since these final deadline, was there, there's been 2 more Sheikh Jassim bids. You can only assume that that was right. Otherwise, why would
you
Sheikh Jassim bid? You wouldn't bid against yourself,
unless
would you?
You knew you were losing.
Well, exactly. Or at least believe that you were losing. So, but this also comes back to the point of, and I know there's been a lot of negativity around the Rain family, and people have opinions, and strong opinions, because it's Manchester United. But sometimes you've got to take a step back. And the Rain Group, they have been employed by the Glazer family to come up with the best deal that it's possible to come up with for the Glazer family. That is their job. Now, if by playing one side against the other, they're increasing the amount that comes back to the Glazer family, well, that is actually them doing their job well. And if they've got a figure that they need to hit for the Glazer family to accept they're going to sell the club or part of the club, well, that is what they're trying to do. And people can criticise them for it, fans can criticise them for it, but that is their job. That is actually what they are being paid to do. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, you can see like all sides of the situation. You can see in a way why, you know, it's taking so long, and then to get the best deal, you can see why the fans are so frustrated behind it. You can see why Ten Hag is frustrated by it. But I mean, we'll finish up a little bit on the takeover talk now, moving to transfers. But I wanted to ask you, do you see it going on into the start of next season? Like, because for me personally, I don't see a world where we can walk into next season with the Glazers still here, because, you know, the protests and the fans, they're going to have something to say about it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But then you also have to look at, unless realistically, unless somebody came back today and said, right, the deal is done, that's it. We don't need a period of exclusivity. We don't need anything. We can just do the deal. Well, how are the Glazers not going to be there for the start of the season? Because even if you say, right, there's exclusivity, there's got to be more checks that have got to be done. We're talking about billions and billions of pounds. If I'm buying a car, I'm making sure that everything's right with the car. Just because I agree to buy the car, there might be a lot of other things that I want to do before I actually hand over my money. And that, you can only multiply that by however many times when you're doing deals of this nature. It's just, that would just make sense. Whether that means we then end up in a period where the Glazers are still nominally the owners of the club, and Joel and Avram are the co-chairman, but we have another party there acting on behalf of Sir Jim Ratcliffe or Sheikh Jassim as a kind of authorising whatever deals happen. Well, that's possible as well, but I just don't think these things happen quickly. And yeah, nobody expected it to have lasted this long. And having lasted this long, it's difficult to see how just at the flick of a switch it can all be done. Yeah, exactly. And we were speaking before the show, and you were saying, and we were both saying, it's hard for the fans that are obviously watching. It's really difficult to, you know, there's obviously really reputable journalists out there that do have really good sources, but we'll know when the Glazers want us to know, is the basic thing about this. You're rarely going to know before the people that are in charge want us to know. Yeah, that is ultimately the reality, and fans can want whatever they want. Most of them, I would imagine, want the Glazer family to be out of the football club, but you know, these things don't just happen immediately, which is why we're up to 31 episodes of How to Buy a Football Club. It's incredible. It'll keep going. I can see it keep going and going and going, to be honest with you, but we'll have to wait and see. Thanks for the insight on that. Darren Mullaney's actually put in a super chat and asked, why don't Qatar Group just pay the fee the Glazers want? Do you think it'll be sorted by the end of the window? Well, you kind of touched on that a little bit then, but... Yeah, I mean, the Glazers, the Qataris don't want to be seen to be overpaying. And why would you overpay? And they've made it perfectly clear, I think, that they're not going to spend more than the deal that's on the table. They did say that they wouldn't engage with the process, but I I couldn't really understand that, because how do you not engage with the process if somebody rings you up and says, right, we're prepared to do a deal? What do? Not answer the phone. So there has to be an engagement with the process to some extent. It's whether they're prepared to come up with more money, whether the Glazers are saying, well, they're saying that, but if we give them another month or 2 months and see what happens, can we eke some more out of this process?
Yeah, we had another super chat in there that said, do you think the Glazers know how the fans feel? And I think they obviously do.
Oh, well, I don't...
Whether they care,
I don't know if they know what the fans think, because I don't know if they ever look at what the fans think. I mean, clearly it wouldn't.
They'll have people that are employed to kind of gauge.
Yeah, but are they going to tell them? I mean, look, they sat at Wembley, didn't they, and heard the fans singing. So I'm pretty sure they do know, but you know, whether it influences their decision is another matter.
I highly doubt it when it comes down to that much money, to be honest with you. And Glazers Out has put a super chat in saying, it doesn't take a rocket science to realise a full sale and takeover, 750 million each, to each sibling is the best deal. Interesting opinion there.
Yeah, but they all own different stakes, so it have to be altered slightly.
Different types of money for each stake, I understand that. And Tanish says, hey Beth, please ask Simon if there's any truth in the Amrabat rumours, or we will sign any other backup for Casemiro. Well, we are going to head into the transfer talk now, so you know what, we'll start with that. I wasn't going to, but I'll start with that super chat, so thanks for that one. We have had some rumours out recently that Fred is probably going to depart, Donny van der Beek as well. I think it is the right time for them players. Yeah. But then also Ten Hag wants another midfielder in, potentially as that cover for Casemiro, and Amrabat has been one of the names. Do you see this happening, or...?
Well, he's a good player, and obviously I think he had a good season for club and country. I'm always a little bit, I don't know, a little bit wary of getting involved too much on an individual, especially when I don't see that as being a priority at the moment. And the reason for that is that there's so much... A club like Manchester United, and this doesn't just go for Manchester United, they can be looking at multiple players for the same position at any given time. I think that they are looking at that midfield position. But what happens if Scott McTominay stays? What happens if there can't be someone to buy Van der Beek, for instance? They can't come to a deal there. So you end up with this kind of stockpile of players. Then you also have Mason Mount. Now, where's Mason Mount going to play? Is he going to play in an advanced role, which I would have thought, or is he going to play in the same position as Eriksen played in, which has been mentioned to me? If he does, where does that leave Eriksen? And I think that all kind of complicates the midfield situation, in addition to the fact that we know now that Manchester United need a goalkeeper. Yeah. So that is an absolute priority, and we know, because it's been spoken about often enough and seems fairly clear, that they need a number 9. So I don't see Manchester United going and buying another midfield player before they fill these problem positions. And that means that a deal for anybody might be a way off. And that means that for someone like Amrabat, other clubs might come in, they might make better offers, more immediate offers, or he might sign another contract and stay where he is. It's all part of the kind of negotiation and the swirl of rumour at the moment.
Well, exactly, because I know we were linked to Lavia a little bit as well, but also you've got Liverpool and Arsenal both linked to Lavia, and I was saying, if you're Lavia right now, of course, Man United is an attractive prospect. We've got Champions League football, Liverpool don't, but Arsenal do. But you're not going to be hanging on to the last weeks of August waiting to see if you can get a United deal when Liverpool and Arsenal are going for you. So it just does depend, and we've spoken to people before, and Fred looks like he's going to leave. McTominay, we're not sure about. Van der Beek, are you going to get anyone to buy him? It is that one where, with United, it's whether we can get them players out the door.
I mean, that United, over the past few years, have been pretty terrible at selling
Yeah.
selling players. There was one summer, I think there was a lot of money for Schneiderlin, I think, who went to Everton, and it seemed as though United had done quite good business that particular transfer window, and aside from that, it just doesn't seem to happen. And the reality is as well that all these players are on good contracts, and trying to find potential buyers who are willing to match those contracts, it's very difficult. Fred's situation, someone mentioned to me about Fulham ages ago, it was widely reported. But if Fred went to Fulham on the wages that he's on, the chances are he'd be like the highest earner, or one of the highest earners. And then if you're kind of Mitrovic or someone like that at Fulham, and Fred goes in and he's getting a lot of money, well, then you're straight into the chief executive saying, "Oh, well, I want that kind of money," because that's the way that football works. I remember Joe Hart when he left Man City and he went initially to West Ham, and they were in the same situation. They had to come up with a really convoluted deal where City, it was like they paid City a loan fee, but then City gave West Ham the loan fee back, so they could make it up in his wages. So he wasn't going beyond what anybody else was getting. And it was really, really complicated. And this is a real thing. I can't stress too much in football. Things that seem easy, go in, buy a player, they're very difficult. Sell players. We've got this player, now we don't want that player, get rid of him. I mean, they've all got contracts, and all of those contracts will have clauses in them that say, if you play this amount of games, you'll be entitled to this amount of money, or if you score this amount of goals, or keep this amount of clean sheets, win this individual prize, win this team prize, you get more money. And those incentives, when it comes to releasing players at the end of their contracts, or not at the end of their contracts, but before their contracts have come to an end, well, then the players' agents are saying, well, yeah, but he's got 2 years left on his contract and he's getting this amount. But if you won the league, and I think you will win the league, he'd have got that, so he should get that. And that is negotiation. It is very, very difficult.
Well, it says a lot with Man United. Dan James is one of the top 5 transfer fees since 2003 or something like that. It is something that we have always struggled with, and it is a complicated situation. But for me, Man United shoot themselves in the foot with these massive contracts that they give out, which realistically we shouldn't have to do when you look at all the other top clubs.
No, they shouldn't. But we are in a situation where Manchester United, sadly for Manchester United, are not
as attractive as they used to be.
Attractive. I mean, it goes without saying. And in order to get the best players, you have to give long contracts, or contracts that you're paying more than you want, or maybe sometimes a combination of both.
Well, hopefully with Ten Hag, that's going to start to change and we start to improve. We've got another super chat in, member for 32 months. Pranvav, hopefully I've not butchered your name there. But hey Beth, considering all this financial fair play and that all that we are going to get eventually, is it a goalkeeper number 9 or nothing? Well, we'll move on to that now, because you were speaking about how difficult it is with contracts. Obviously we let De Gea go because his contract had expired, which is a much easier situation for the club than trying to sell him and moving on, which would have been nearly impossible to do if he was still in contract, in my opinion. But on the Onana news, it is coming out from a lot of people that this is really close to happening. Is it Ten Hag that's pushing for this, and do you see this deal happening?
I don't think the issue with the deal will be the players' wages, because if you consider that you're losing De Gea, who was the highest paid goalkeeper in the world when he was given his contract, I doubt very much that Onana will be on the same terms. It's whether Manchester United are willing to pay the transfer fee. They say they need compromise. It doesn't appear as though Inter Milan are willing to compromise. However, Manchester United also need a goalkeeper, and it's a bit of an uncomfortable situation because people are saying, yeah, it can be Dean Henderson. Dean Henderson's not actually fit at the moment. I don't think he was injured at the end of last season. I'm not expecting him to play against Leeds. I'd be surprised if he did. But is Dean Henderson a Manchester United #1 goalkeeper? I was in Istanbul, and it wasn't the first time I'd seen Onana play, but it was the first time I'd watched him really, really closely. And I just thought he is very much a modern day goalkeeper. And I've seen how he'll cost you goals. Well, he might do at some point, because that's the way he plays. But Alisson has cost Liverpool goals. Edison has cost Man City goals. That is the way goalkeepers play.
Risk and reward.
Yeah, well, it is, because you need to be able to play these passes to get you further up the pitch when you're receiving possession, and that gives you more of a chance to exert yourselves on opponents. And clearly, and this is something that I've not been able to get my head around in terms of construction of Manchester United teams, almost since Van Gaal left. And I'm not holding Van Gaal's side up as an example of the way to play football, because some of the football was turgid, but he argued that he didn't have a centre forward, so that's a different argument. But Manchester United have been dominated in terms of possession.
Yeah.
And that is not Manchester United. That's not the way. You control games. You're Manchester United. You don't play on the break. West Ham play on the break, or, you know, I don't know, like Crystal Palace play on the break. Leicester won a league title playing on the break. Manchester United don't win league titles by playing on the break. They win league titles by having good footballers who are good on the ball. That is the whole point. Mm-hmm. So if we're in an era where the goalkeeper's part of that, well, you've got to have a goalkeeper that does it. And I was of the view that if De Gea was staying, and it looked as though that was what was going to happen, that buying another experienced keeper was a bit pointless, because you need a centre forward. But De Gea hasn't stayed, and so United need a goalkeeper. If it's not going to be Onana, who is it going to be? If you're not going to pay the transfer fee, who are you paying a transfer fee for? It seems like a no-brainer to me if they can do the deal.
Well, what confuses me about it is, I know there's certain respects that had to be paid to De Gea, and rightly so, especially considering, you know, there was a lot of opinions about the way it kind of was handled. Should he have got the farewell at Old Trafford? I think the majority of the fans all believe he should have, and it just should have been handled earlier. I think a lot of fans would think about that. But it's the fact we've announced to the whole world we don't have a keeper while we're still negotiating a fee. And it's like, well, Inter Milan now, if they wanted to, really could just turn around and say, no.
Yeah, well, yes, and this goes to the heart of doing deals, doesn't it? Inter Milan are in a very strong position, in the sense of they have an asset that Manchester United want. If you look a bit deeper up with Inter Milan, they're not in quite as strong position as you'd think, because they racked up huge losses when Antonio Conte was there, and he spent a lot of money and he didn't win the title, and he persuaded them to spend even more money to fund another go at the title, which they eventually won. But then they ended up having to get rid of players, and that's why Lukaku went back there, and Chelsea got stung really with a deal for a player that they couldn't get any money for, who only wanted to go to one place. Inter Milan don't have a lot of money compared to Manchester United, so the deal can be done. I don't see Inter Milan just saying no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. Eventually, I think there will be a deal, but you're right. Manchester United don't have a goalkeeper at the moment, and the longer you wait for Onana to come in or somebody else, then the longer it's taking to get used to the way that the team are playing. And you would want, most of the internationals are not back yet, so the bulk of the squad isn't back yet, but you would want them all back together at roughly the same time, and then they can grow together. That's the whole point of building a team, rather than even last season waiting until a point, right at the start of the season, when suddenly you got a new goalkeeper and you say, there you go.
Well, you want the keeper to be in, especially working with the whole team, because they need to get used to the way he plays. It's night and day compared to what we had with De Gea. But on Henderson, quickly before I move on to the striker, he's made it very clear he doesn't want to stay unless he's number one. He's not going to be number one with Onana coming in, and it looks like he is on his way out, and to Nottingham Forest as well.
Yeah.
that's homegrown from the academy. That's a full profit United could get that could potentially go towards the transfer fund.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I'm saying about what the players that you sell and the money that you sell them for, and what that can mean in terms of the value to the football club. It's interesting. I mean, the interesting thing, I saw a lot of Nottingham Forest last year, and Henderson was excellent for them in the first months of the season when Forest were struggling. He put in some really good performances. The interesting thing about that was that there were already rumours, and then Henderson got injured, and then Keylor Navas came in. And Navas, his experience helped. It was more than Navas, but his experience helped Forest in some key games towards the end of the season, and that helped keep them up. Now, the question is for Steve Cooper, do you go back for Dean Henderson, believing that you have a squad that has grown, and you've got people like Morgan Gibbs-White, who was instrumental in helping Forest stay up and was one of the key figures in England under 21s winning the Euros.
Like Gibbs-White,
so if you've got players like that, you've got more of a handle over this ridiculous size squad, and therefore you can move forward and would either take him on loan again or buy someone like Henderson? Or is he at the back of his mind thinking, do you know what, this was very, very close, we survived by the skin of our teeth, we will be better off with an experienced goalkeeper, and that experienced goalkeeper is Keylor Navas or somebody else, and that puts Henderson back in a quandary, really.
It'll be interesting to see how that does develop, because I get where you're coming from on that. And Darren Mulaney has said, if Qatar get the club before the end of the transfer window, can you see them going for Kane? It's for you, Simon.
Well, yeah. Well, not if they've got one number 9 and Martial's still there. Where do you fit everybody in? I'm not saying
Martial being the injury room.
Well,
most
yeah,
of the time,
yeah.
so.
I'm not like Kane is clearly the top option for anybody wanting a number 9, I suppose, apart from Real Madrid when we're looking at the uncertainty over Mbappe's future. But Mbappe is a different player to Kane, clearly. I just wonder whether at the back of their minds United are thinking Tottenham are not going to sell to Bayern Munich. They might do, they might not. But even if they do, Kane's going to want to come back at some point because he wants this record. We think we can get him out of Bayern Munich in a way that we can't get him out of Tottenham. And they think that in 12 months' time, if Kane does stay at Tottenham, well, they can get Kane for nothing anyway. And that is the play. That would be how I thought about it. Now, if you're constructing a team around, like on that basis, do you really sit there and think we're going to bring in a number 9 and then we're going to try and sign Harry Kane right at the end of the window? And then what do you do with someone like Martial? Because you would have to kind of move him on. But that would be we talk about financial plays, that would be a big move because Kane clearly will attract a massive transfer fee, huge wages, and you would have to find somewhere for Martial to go. Now, if you can put that deal together in the space of a week, 4 or 5 days, maybe that is what's going to happen. But equally, I would think that Tottenham might, knowing Levy, might think if he gets down to that point, he's not going to want to sell because Postecoglou's constructed his own squad. It'll be fascinating. It would be fascinating if that is the way that the scenario unfolds, to see how that particular situation unfolds, because I don't see anyone on the market at the moment. And I know people have talked about Hojlund. He's a lot of promise. Kane is as big a guarantee of goals as you can possibly find. It's
crazy how Kane would literally... I mean, I am happy with the way the transfer window is going so far, kind of. I wish we would have been a bit more advanced, and I wish we would have, know what's happening with number 9. But it's crazy that if, United somehow did manage to sign Kane, it's just an automatic brilliant window because of how much he just transforms that team. I personally think, I look at United now and I think, why have we not gone for a centre forward yet? I don't know if something, maybe somewhere along the lines, we're thinking about going back in for Kane later down the line. Maybe that's just me dreaming like that because obviously I'm a United fan, I'd love to get him. But also I'm thinking to myself, you know, if Kane refuses to sign a new contract, surely it's not worth it for Daniel Levy to keep him for a year, because he's going to go on a free when he could get 100 million for him this year.
There's a few ways of looking at it, isn't there? I kind of look at it from Harry Kane's perspective and think, you signed this 6-year contract, you've had 5 years, there's been at least 3 of those years where clubs have come in for, probably every year, clubs have come in for him, and it's felt as though he wanted to move, and it's not happened because Daniel Levy has said no. If you're now saying he's a year out from being able to leave for nothing, and clubs are willing to pay 60, 70, 80 million pounds for him, if you're Harry Kane, you might be thinking, well, if I stay for another year, that 60, 70, 80 million, that's coming my way. Yeah. So I'll give it another year. Equally, I can see from Tottenham's perspective that both sides, they either think we can get money in for Kane now and we're not going to get it in 12 months' time. On the other side of it, I could see that Levy might think, I'm not going to sell him because A, I'm going to have another 6 months, bearing in mind he could sign a pre-contracted agreement with Bayern Munich in January or anybody else abroad. But I'm going to have another 6 months at persuading him to sign another contract because Postecoglou can do this. And also, how demoralising is it for the Tottenham fan base, who are already anti the ownership, if they then sell Harry Kane, because then they need a striker as well. So Postecoglou's done a press conference today, and he said, he clearly says what everybody thinks. Kane's a brilliant player. He's also said, I can't offer any guarantees, and I think that's because there's no decision yet, and that decision will have to be taken by Daniel Levy in the end, I suppose. Yeah,
he's a tough one. He's a tough one to negotiate with. I just can't see Kane in a Bayern Munich shirt, but we'll have to wait and see. I suppose it'd make...
I couldn't see Messi in any other shirt than Barcelona, and it happened.
It ends up happening, doesn't it? I suppose it'd definitely be easy for Levy to take him going to Germany than to staying in the Premier League to United. I always find it funny that they think they're our rivals at this moment in time. I really do see a big gap right now between where Spurs are going to go this season. I might be wrong, but if I was a Spurs fan, I'd want to keep hold of Kane, but realistically that 100 million could be invested so well. But then
it's interesting you say that, because last summer Tottenham had qualified for the Champions League and United hadn't, and were in a real mess, weren't they? No, maybe not now, but you know, when the Ranić time ended. And did Tottenham fans view Manchester? They would have probably been saying, well, Manchester United are not rivals to us. How can they be rivals? Things change very quickly. It's funny. I don't include Manchester City in this. But at the start of last season, I'm pretty sure everybody thought Liverpool are going to be City's challengers. Didn't qualify for the Champions League. I'm pretty sure they thought Arsenal not going to qualify for the Champions League, ended up being City's challengers. And I'm pretty sure they thought if United get any kind of Champions League place, it'll be fourth, and they'll be lucky to get that because Chelsea are going to do well with the new ownership and the players that they've bought. And look what happened. Yeah. Things change very quickly, and it's what you've got to do in football. It's never changed. You have to get your recruitment right. You need to get good players who are willing to play for a manager who has a plan. And that has never changed. It will never change. And if you have players fighting against the manager, if you have a manager without a plan, if you have a manager who doesn't really know what he's doing, if you have players that don't fit together, it won't work. And at the moment, Manchester City are the ones who have lots of money and they also have a plan. And they can kind of carry players a little bit, like they did with Grealish 2 years ago, like they did with Calvin Phillips last year, in a way that no other club can. So Liverpool's recruitment was really, really good with Mane and with Salah and with Firmino. Then that ended because Mane wanted to leave, and then they brought players in. I think we're very quick to judge, and I don't just talk about Liverpool here, I talk about every other club. And the players that they brought in didn't quite hit the ground running, and that cost them. Manchester United brought in last year, I thought they had a decent transfer window, bringing in people like Casemiro, bringing in people like Eriksen, and they reaped the benefits of that. Arsenal had a good transfer window because they brought in Jesus and Zinchenko, who elevated them. Some of their young players improved, like Martinelli. So they did well. You know, Ramsdale was another one. I don't think anybody expected him to perform as well as he did. Now they've spent money. We'll see whether those players, on the face of it, someone like Declan Rice, is fantastic, but we'll see when he starts playing as to whether he has the impact that they want.
Well, that's the thing with young players, it's always a risk. I do want to quickly ask you about Hojlund. Obviously, that's one that's highly talked about right now. It is a risk. Is Ten Hag wanting to bring Hojlund in? Does that? And also, there's been talks about Mason Greenwood going the other way on loan. Is that something that could happen? Right.
Okay. So I don't. I think there's two elements to that. I think Hojlund, yes, United want him clearly, and I think he's the kind of player that almost fits the Ten Hag template, because he likes. I think he's good at working with young players. And if you look, don't forget the Ajax team that got to the semi-finals of the Champions League got within seconds of getting to the final of the Champions League. So many of those players have gone, but how many have done well?
That's true.
And I think that is because they worked with Ten Hag, they bought into his philosophy, they were young players, and he got a lot out of them. And I think you've got to remember that and think about the way that the manager prefers to work. So I can see why that is attractive. I think Greenwood, I think, again, that is a complicated, for obvious reasons, that is a complicated situation. And I'd be reluctant to put him in as part of a transfer for anybody until Manchester United have decided the way that situation is going to be resolved from their perspective, and then what happens, because I think there are a lot of unanswered questions around the Mason Greenwood situation that it's just better to wait for the club to decide what is happening there. Definitely.
With Hojlund, obviously there's lots of talks around his price tag being around 50 million, United going in for that kind of bid. Is that where you see it?
Yeah, as well? I think it's a similar kind of situation to Onana. I think United have a price that they want to pay. Maybe it's not quite as there's not quite as much stress on the situation as there is with Onana for reasons that we've spoken about. I mean, Manchester United, they do have a striker in Martial. They clearly have Marcus Rashford, even though we know he doesn't really want to play through the centre. Hojlund is a bit of a different kind of player. So I don't think there's as much pressure on that situation for Atalanta to come to the table and say, yes, I think United are in a better negotiating position there. And we'll just see what happens. But, it's clear that Ten Hag wants him.
Yes, for sure. I mean, it's something that I feel like is a risk, but if the risk pays off, it'd be brilliant. He's definitely got a very high ceiling. I mean, I want to talk to you a little bit about João Felix as well, because we've been linked back to him again today, and we know Ten Hag did want him in January. We just didn't want to pay the extortionate loan fee. Do you think, with the way financial fair play is as well, do you think that's a route they could go down this summer, that loan for João Felix?
I just don't see, but for the conversations that we've had, I don't see how that works. Are Atletico willing to let him go on loan again? It didn't really work for him at Chelsea, did it? He didn't really have the impact that most people thought, and I think he's obviously a player with a lot of talent. I just don't know whether at this moment in time he is the type of player that Manchester United want. When you think they've got, as I was saying earlier on, they've signed Mount. Where else where would someone like João Felix? Where's Mount going to play? Where would João Felix play within the squad?
Probably just a versatile type player that could come in with the squad, Champions League football.
Yeah, exactly.
He's going to want to play that type of player.
Yeah, I just, you don't want to be in the position of stockpiling players, and I just think there would have to be movement within the squad for that kind of deal to be thought about as being a realistic one. I mean, you still need a number 9 if you brought in someone like João Felix. So
yeah, maybe Martial does move on that. I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see. But next thing is Harry Maguire. 50 million price tag looks like has been put on his head by Man United. Meant to be held in talks with Ten Hag this week about him potentially leaving the club. Also looks like Man United are highly monitoring, a word that's used all the way throughout the transfer window, Disasi of Monaco. Newcastle looking at that as well. Is that something that you can see happening, Maguire moving on?
Well, the only thing I would say about Maguire, and again, sometimes you have to take a bit of a step back. Clearly, we can all see why it would make sense for Harry Maguire to leave Manchester United, in terms of he came in as a big money signing. He's clearly, however you look at it, not part of Ten Hag's first choice central defensive partnership. Probably not first choice to come in. Depends how you look at, who comes in for Varane on the right side. Varane does have injuries, but I go back to what I said. Paid a lot of money for Varane, but you paid a lot of money for Maguire. How much do you want for him? His wages are going to be high. What is another club willing to pay for him? So it's almost inevitable that Manchester United, in some way, shape or form, are going to have to fund a deal for Maguire to leave the club. So if you're funding a deal in terms of wages, maybe, and then you get in a lower fee than you think, well, Maguire's a first-team player. So you let him go, well, you're down a centre-half, aren't you? You can't just let Harry Maguire go and not bring in someone else. So then you have to bring someone else in. So is it that you're willing to sell Maguire at any price, or that you're willing to sell Maguire if the deal's right, or you're willing to sell Maguire because he is adamant that he wants to go, because he wants to play for England at the Euros, and it's not certain that will happen, albeit Calvin Phillips still managed to keep his place in the England squad, and he played hardly at all. So these are all the factors that you have to bear in mind. It's easy to say, Harry Maguire, not good enough, get somebody else in. It's not quite as easy to do the deal. Well,
there's talks of him losing the captaincy this week, apparently, that Bruno might be announced as a new captain of Man United. You can see it coming, but that's also going to affect, I feel like, things a little bit. Is that not a sign that he should move on? I think maybe possibly, but can you see the captaincy being? Well,
it will be a blow, won't it? A loss of prestige if you're not wearing the armband. Is it a blow that would force you out of the football club? Bearing in mind, you've been on the bench loads, and you know that Bruno Fernandes is captain when you're not playing, and there have been times when you've been sat on the bench and not played. So is it the straw that breaks the camel's back? I wouldn't have thought that was as big a deal as feeling as though your place in the England squad would be at risk if you don't play. So it is another factor, but I think the issue over whether Maguire plays and how much he feels as though he has to play to be part of Gareth Southgate's squad for the Euros, I think that is more of a, to me, that feels like more of a reason to look elsewhere.
We'll have to wait and see what happens. Do you know anything about Ten Hag's position on Sancho, by the way?
Well, he's another one that I'd say if you sell Jadon Sancho, you sell him at a loss, don't you? He's not done.
For now, yeah.
Funnily enough, I saw him in Australia last year, and I thought he was linking up in training. There was one particular training session at the Wacker, it was, in Perth, and he looked so good with Dalot on that right-hand side. And it looked as though it could be a real useful weapon. And it's funny how football works, because in the end, Sancho, I don't think he ever really recovered from that England squad announcement in the September, which was the kind of precursor to going to the World Cup, and he was left out of that, and there were no kind of soothing words that saying, oh yeah, he's still on our radar. It was almost like, yeah, I mean, that was him. And it affected his confidence. Then he dropped out of the squad, and we had all that situation over when he was training on his own, and Ten Hag had to deal with that when we spoke to him in Spain during the kind of warm-up, and then it took him time to get back into training with the first team again, and then he never got on his form. And you kind of think that's, is it time for Sancho to move on? But if it is, well, who's going to pay a big fee for him? Who's going to pay his wages? And if nobody is willing to do that, what are Manchester United prepared to lose in order to sell him? And sometimes, and I'm not saying this is going to happen specifically with Sancho or Maguire or Fred or McTominay or whoever, but sometimes Martial, sometimes you've got to keep players that you don't really want, because you can't literally sell everybody.
That's United all over, isn't it? It's the same thing with each player. The contract's too high, a big transfer fee, and then maybe it doesn't end up working out. And that's with players we want to sell anyway. Obviously, players have worked out in the past, but it's just, when it doesn't, that is kind of where it becomes hard to shift. Also, you don't know with Pelestri and Ahmad, are they going to go out on loan? Are they going to stay? It's one of them situations, isn't it? But
and you've got Garnacho coming through, and you would, that's the other thing is, and this is a hypothetical. I don't know how this situation works out, but Garnacho has made a bit of a breakthrough. He's played international football. Well, now is he wanting to play? And then if he's sat on the bench and he's not playing, is he then saying, well, do you know what? I can get a better deal. I can play somewhere else. Because the Premier League is the highest level. So, you've got to kind of try and keep everyone happy. And if the dynamic alters, that can have an impact. And so are you better? It's nothing to do with Manchester United, but it's to do with England. And Conor Cody at the was it the Euros where England reached the final, and I don't think Cody played, but he was almost the most important player in the squad, because he was sat on the bench. He was never playing, but he was the most positive person within the squad. And you can have a player in that situation who's not playing and knows he's not going to play, and he can drag down, because players are mates. So if someone's unhappy, well, that can unsettle the rest of the squad as well. I do
think that's something that Ten Hag's done very well to kind of recover this season and manage stuff, for example, with the Ronaldo stuff and things like that. I do trust Ten Hag to be able to do that, but we're getting a few super chats towards the end of the show. We've got John O'Hare saying United are risking upsetting players and keeping at the club due to being incapable of selling. Yeah, we have got that situation. We've had that situation for quite a while, to be honest with you. And Rizik says, hi Beth, can Simon answer this for us? Would Sir Jim and Qatar consider a legal route since they have signed a non-disclosure agreement?
Well, it's an interesting question, but a legal route on what grounds?
That's what
the statement was strategic alternatives, one of which was a sale, but that didn't commit them to selling. So you went through a process.
Well, you're still not sure about
you could win, you could lose, or they might decide not to sell. You knew that when you started, so I don't see how the legal argument would stack up.
Yeah, because they've been clear on that. Well, to finish the show, it's been a great interview, Simon. Thank you for coming on. We just want to ask you just an opinion-based kind of question, which is...
BBC, I'm not allowed opinions.
You aren't allowed an opinion on this show. Your opinion-based is, how do you see Man United lining up next season? What additions do you see? And where do you think Man United can finish next season? What do you think is going to happen for them next season?
I don't think... I've been waiting for this for a long time, and I'm gonna kind of fudge the answer. In my opinion,
not a journalist avoiding the question.
in my opinion, there has been at least 3 occasions before now where Manchester United have got to a position where they have climbed, I wouldn't say halfway up the mountain, but they've gone from a place of slipping back away from the pack to a position where they can challenge. And they did it under Van Gaal, and they didn't supply him with the strikers and the players that he wanted. They did it under Mourinho that summer where it all kicked off because he wanted rid of people like Martial, and United was sticking with him, and then he got sacked the following year. And it happened under Solskjaer when they finished second. And on each of those occasions, United have never followed up on that. They're here again.
Yeah.
And Ten Hag has done a lot. And he has the background, a different background to the other 3. He's got more experience than Solskjaer, clearly. He's not as abrasive as Mourinho in terms of his dealings with the ownership and the executives at the club, and he is not as far into his career as Van Gaal, so it doesn't have to be now. But United are back here again, in my opinion, and they've got to go there, and they may have to go there to get to Man City. It's a long way up,
to get to, isn't it?
But can Manchester United go from there upwards rather than drop right back again and have to do that work all over again? And I think the conditions are there, no matter who the owners are, to climb again. To climb again. That has to be the aim. Now, whether that gets them higher than 3rd, that's linear, because you don't know how good Liverpool are going to do, you don't know how good Arsenal are going to do, you don't know how good Chelsea are going to do, you don't know who's going to slip back. But United have to feel as though at the end of next season they're near a City, because got to the end of this season and they did okay in the cup final, they won a trophy, they did okay in the cup final. Did they really look a better side than City in the cup final? I don't think so. City won the treble. They're the best team in Europe. It's clear, it's obvious. That is the target. I think at the end of next season, you have to feel as though you can get there. That is what Manchester United are aiming for. And I think they can do that. But I'll repeat something that I said earlier on in this chat. It's all about recruitment. You have to get the recruitment right. And if you don't, you won't get anywhere.
And do you think with the signings of Mount, Onana and Hojlund, that's the right recruitment to take him to that level?
I think that will help. I think Onana will allow Manchester United to play in a different way. As I said before, I thought there was an argument for saying you don't need him if you've got De Gea. United have ended up in this situation now. If they kept De Gea, I would have felt all the money that they're looking at to try and buy these 2 players, that will bring you a really, really good striker, and that would have been the way that I would have gone. But United are in this position now, and I think Onana can change the dynamic of the way the team play, because he can do things with a football that De Gea simply can't do, and that will alter the speed that United play. It will alter the angles that they can play passes at and where they can attack from, how quickly they can transition the ball forward. And I think that has the potential to transform United into the kind of team that Ten Hag wants. and maybe at the end of next season, then, unless Kane comes in this season, it'll be a bit like Liverpool when in the time that Alisson and Van Dijk came in. You think there's a team there, what they need now is a number 9, and then that might be the time to go and get Kane. That's what I would think that the possibility for Manchester United is at the end of this season.
Good answer. We got it out of you, and it's a butterfly effect, isn't it, at the end of the day, depending how we go in the transfer window. But thank you, Simon, very much for coming on. Super, super insightful there, and our audience loved it as well. And I really enjoyed the interview, and people can find you, obviously, they know where to find you. You're Simon Stone with the BBC. But How to Buy a Football Club on BBC Sounds podcast, really insightful.
Yeah. We've got 31 episodes. The 31st episode went up today. Anybody who's got loads of time to spare, listen to it all. It's really insightful and goes into areas that, yeah, hopefully it's an education, but hopefully it's entertaining as well. But we've really enjoyed putting it together, and I've really enjoyed coming on here today.
Thank you. It'd be interesting to see it from start to finish where it's at now and how much progress has actually been made on that. But
some would argue not much.
Yeah, not much. But there's 31 episodes, so go and enjoy that. But thank you, Simon, and thank you to everyone at home as well, wherever you are over the world, for tuning in and listening. Thank you for all your super chats. We really, really appreciate it. Mark will be back at the 8 p.m. show. Any updates regarding breaking news will be brought to you here. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.